We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. By the time you hear this, it will be Sunday, in spite of the fact that we're recording on Friday night. Um, and I'm recording this on Halloween night, just to keep full transparency. I was with my granddaughter and my grandson and my son and daughter-in-law for Halloween. Granddaughter went out at first as Glinda the Good Witch, and then Wilbur the Pig from Charlotte's Web. So that was pretty awesome. I gave out candy as they were roaming the streets, and we had a good time. So I'm doing my duty as a grandfather, and I love the hell out of it. I haven't done this since my kids were little, so that's been a long time. But on today's show, we have somebody you know who's been on the show before, Howard. Howard is from Western Minnesota, rural Minnesota, very red Minnesota. And Howard, welcome to the show. And I think people need to know that Howard, this old gruff guy, like you see him here, like like either one of us being old and kind of gruff, he is now quickly becoming an activist, not along the same lines of Old Soul. Um, Last time we talked, you were getting ready to go out to the No Kings protest, and how did that go?
Um, I went to the No Kings protest in Morris, Minnesota. It was a good thing to go to. I was kind of disappointed that it was only a couple hundred people, but you got to realize I live in a very red part of the state, and Morris isn't that big. But it does a person good to be around people of a like mind and that can see what's going on like we are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So
On the previous podcast, I had Ed back after a 2 week respite, and Ed was at the No Kings protest in Tennessee, which is an entirely red state. And he was, I don't know, I think he was in Kingston or something. And he said they had a 75 or 750 person turnout. So when you got these red areas and those kind of people are turning out, that tells you something.
yeah, it did a lot for my morale too, because I hate to say it, I've been against Donald Trump since his first term, and then you know we then he campaigned for I don't know how many years for his second term,
Yeah.
but I actually got kind of burnt out, and he's hitting us so hard, so fast, and making changes. We can't give up on this fight. So I go into the No Kings rally, even though it wasn't a big one. It was like a fresh of breath air for
Right.
somebody in a somebody blue like me in a very red sea out here.
And you caught the bug, as it were, because now
Yeah, next thing.
you're talking about going to Washington D.C. The 22nd or so of the month of November. So what
Yeah.
got you to you got kind of fired up and you decided you wanted to go out?
Well, I started hearing about this thing in November, and then here I'm 62 years old, and for a living, I cut trees and I spray for weeds for a lot of townships. So November is a deader month for me, and I have I don't know meat in this fight because I have a Hispanic daughter and all my grandkids are brown, and I got a white daughter, and she adopted a little boy, and he's of the brown color, and I love my family. Anyway, I come to the conclusion where I can take the time to go out there, and I was going to finance this thing myself, and I would if I end up having to, but then I thought, well, it would help if I got gas money because there might be another one after this. So anyway, today we spent over $600 on plane tickets from Buffalo to Washington D.C. because I'm gonna go out to a friend of mine's house, rest for a day, and then him and I are both going to Washington for the day of the 22nd. So anyway, I'm on TikTok and I sent up a Venmo account off my TikTok, and my TikTok is Howard Paulson. So if you feel the urge.
Well,
Gas
well,
money
let's uh,
helps.
well,
Go ahead.
let's just make it direct here. I don't usually ask for money for things. Certainly not myself. But when it's a good cause, I get tons of people saying, "Would you collect money for this cause or that cause?" And I don't know if it's real. I'm not going to launch into anything. But those of you listening, um, you know who Howard is. We know who Howard is. He wants to go to D.C. He needs a few bucks for gas and that sort of thing. And if you have a mind to help him out, you don't have to. But if you
No.
want to, what's the Venmo? What's the Venmo they can go to?
Well, it's linked to my bio on my TikTok. I guess I don't know if that you can go to the link and use it. I'm not very computer literate. My wife set it up for me.
Well, what's the name on it? Is it your name?
Howard Paulson.
Let me just check and see if it comes up.
Okay, and I will
Um,
be taking footage of when I'm out there too. So
yeah, maybe we can have you on the show while you're out there.
oh, that'd be
Um,
great.
we can do something like that because we're getting closer to more things. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I've got a couple. I've got at Howard Dash Paulson. I'm assuming that's you. Have you ever used Venmo before?
This was the first time.
Okay, so if you want to find Howard's Venmo, it's Howard HOWARD dash Paulson PAULSEN. That's
Yes.
correct spelling. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the Venmo if you want to, and you're not asking for a ton of money.
No, no. I'm thinking $1,800 is going to get me there and back. I may have to stay one night in a motel because I am 62 years old. This is going to be go out there, do my thing, get back, and come back, as quick as I can. So,
You want to give him a couple bucks to help him get there? Cool. If you just want to cheer him on and root for him, you can do that in the comments. I'm sure he'd appreciate either one. So keep that in mind. I'll give that Venmo out at the end of the show too. So for those people who
sure.
may want to do it, we'll be in a position to do that. Um, so, so Howard, I'm wondering what you're experiencing out in the sea of red that you've described before. Um, we're at the point past November 1st. By the time people hear this, presumably SNAP payments will be ending. I know there's some court cases that are trying to force them to use the emergency funding, which they should. We'll talk about that in a minute. But do you have a sense of how many people that might impact in the area? I mean, you live in a sparse area. There's not a ton of people, but I'm guessing a fair percentage of people in your area count on SNAP or something else that's called different, something different, but the same.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, Mike, out where we live, there's probably not a lot of unemployed people. And I guess people use it even that are employed because they don't make enough.
Hmm.
That's one thing I very seldom ever shop for my own groceries. That's something my wife does. All I know is we're not the type of people that why do we want to let people go hungry? you know, Everybody wants to bitch about people getting a little bit of help, but we can take over 4.5 trillion and give it back to the billionaires. How many people would that feed?
Well,
You
that's
know,
exactly right. And we can send $40 billion to Argentina to compete against us in agriculture. Um, Donald Trump can build a $300 million ballroom. It it smells of let them eat cake, a la Marie Antoinette.
and then they don't want to release. They got temporary SNAP money available, and they're lying right to our constituents' faces that they can't use that money. They used it the last term he was in, he used it when he had the government shut down for 35 days. I hate to say it, but maybe the best thing they can do right now is not send it out on November 1st because, what I don't understand is how stupid this man can be because, when people start going hungry, and I don't know how many months ago I was on your program and I said, when people start going hungry, the poor will eat the rich. And I'm not saying about skewering them, but shit will go down. People need to eat.
And it's one thing if you're taking away food from adults, but if you're an adult and you have kids or grandkids and they aren't eating, that's going to rile some motherfuckers up. They're going to get pissed. I know I would be pissed if it were me. If you're taking food out of my kid's mouth or my grandkid's mouth, there's going to be a fight. One way or another, there's going to be a fight.
Yeah, and that's the part that I don't understand, But up to this point, he's taken women's rights away. He's taken, handicap rights away. What's that saying? And about what Hitler did to he what's that saying about it? He didn't come for me, so I didn't stand against it. Then he went after this people, and I didn't stand against it. And then he came for me, and there was nobody left there to stand for me. We're almost getting to that point, Mike. We got to start standing up and fighting back.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And you mentioned something um, that's a very good point that there is emergency money available for just this kind of situation when there's a shutdown to keep SNAP running. And you're absolutely right. In the first term, when Donald Trump shut the country down for 35 days, SNAP never missed a beat because they used the emergency money. Now, this time around, they're saying they can't use the emergency money. And I have a couple of thoughts on that. Donald Trump is trying to use as much pressure on the Democrats for them to cave and give him what he wants. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he's the one that's forcing the Republicans not to cave on this situation. The other thing I brought up in a couple of other podcasts, knowing what we know about Donald Trump, and when we talk about Mike Johnson, he was saying, well, we can't legally do it, which is a flat out lie, a blatant lie. And then he says, we can't do it. The money's not there. And that struck me as strange that he would say that. Because if it's emergency funding, there should be no question that that money's there. And I wonder, with all the money that Donald Trump is spending, is it possible that he dipped into that fund to pay for some other bullshit that he's doing, his golf games or planes or whatever the fuck? I don't know. It seems weird that they're pushing so hard on this that they can't pay him. It's an easy thing to say, yeah, let the emergency funds pay it. Like you say, they did it before. I'm worried that they're hiding something, hiding the fact that they maybe use that money elsewhere, and then they'll be exposed.
That, and I've always, if the money's not there, the other thing, he's been paying all these ICE agents and signing, they've been getting bonuses and they've been getting this and they've been getting that. That's almost like a private police force. I, he's been paying them guys from someplace because if they weren't getting paid, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of money being spent. And I've known narcissists before who are not good with money. They like to appear rich, they like to appear successful. So they'll steal from Peter to pay Paul, and then they'll steal from Paul to pay Peter. And they're just trying to do a balancing act and keep their money uh, where they can access it for whatever they need in that moment. But ultimately, that gets out of control. It becomes overwhelming. They can't handle it. And that's when things crash. And that's one of the things I'm worried about with Donald Trump, with all the financial things going on and how little we know about it. When he's finally done, we might see an absolute financial disaster in our federal government.
I highly doubt that, Mike. We all know that Donald Trump is a very good businessman. That's why he's only been bankrupt 7 fucking times.
Well, that's a good point. I guess I hadn't considered that. It's just so we know what happened on Friday. This is Friday when we're recording at Halloween. And we know that a Rhode Island judge came out and said, we're putting an injunction on this um, because, according to law, Donald Trump and the Trump administration have to use that emergency funding. And he's giving them till Monday, tomorrow, after you hear this, to address that. There's also a judge in Massachusetts who has suggested that it's not legal for him to do that. The only problem with that is we know that Donald Trump has occasion to ignore the courts. And when you throw in ignoring the courts, maybe misappropriation of funds, and people starving, this could explode into something really fucking huge.
As far as ignoring the courts, I don't have a lot of confidence in our court system anymore because if he gets a judge that disagrees with him, he just goes and finds a judge that overrules that last judge, blah, blah, blah. And look at what he's done to our Supreme Court. If I was Donald Trump, I'd be more worried about the people going hungry than any court system. And he doesn't follow the law, the law. He's a criminal. He doesn't know how to follow the court system.
And he's incredibly dumb too.
Yes.
He said something about the shutdown. He said, "Look, if you shut it down, we're going to eliminate a lot of liberal programs." Now, I'll guarantee you he looks at SNAP as a liberal program because the Republicans would never agree to that. But he doesn't account for is there's a lot of people in red states that count on SNAP. Now, they might think it's called something else. I mean, I told Ed this yesterday. I said I heard somebody talk about this on TikTok where people in red states are now realizing SNAP is going to affect them, and they didn't think it was going to affect them because they felt as though that SNAP was only money for people of color, which is absolutely fucking stupid. Why would you make that differential in providing a safety net? But they really believe that, and it's ending up. It's going to be a lot like the ACA, where people like the ACA but don't like Obamacare, even though they're one and the same. There's a lot of people that are going to get blindsided here, thinking that they're going to be okay, and they are going to get hammered. You take away their health care, you take away their food. There's not a lot left for them to lose.
No, it'll get to the point, and that's exactly you're right. When people have nothing left to lose, then they get me. That's when the fight really is going to come out. And the other thing that he's trying to eliminate, and you just brought it up, was health care. We've
Yeah.
given $40 billion to Argentina. What do they have in Argentina? They got free health care. How many billions do we give to Israel? What do they have in Israel? They got free health care.
And free
But we
school.
can't afford to have free health care here. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And when I was talking to Ed, I thought, I know during the 30s and into the 40s when we had the depression and the far right radicals, and then all of a sudden FDR comes in and they all of a sudden go more progressive. I'm hoping against hope that once this is all said and done, when people truly suffer with their health care, truly suffer with their food, that might force the Democrats or this country in general to go more left and uh, just to try to make things right. There's no reason in this country we should have health care that people can't afford. No other country has that. We don't need to have it. It's an easy fix. Um, but the Republicans have created the narrative, oh, we can't afford that. We can't afford that. I think the Republicans have pretty much destroyed their narrative now. People are seeing who they are and what they are, and they might be in for some fucking surprises once they're out of office.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, as long as we're talking about us being a rich nation and, we got the highest cost of health care. They want to eliminate, the SNAP. I was watching a TikTok on from Mr. Global the other day, and one thing he brought out, in China, their electric bills are going down because of
Yeah.
renewable energy. And over here, they're telling us renewable energy costs more than it saves. Well, as long as they keep feeding us the bullshit, the billionaires keep getting richer. It's just like our healthcare scenario. Everybody says, well, Canada's got free healthcare, but up there you got to wait to see a doctor. Well, fuck. Down here, you got to wait to see a doctor. The only thing, the difference between here and Canada is in Canada, you don't walk out with $100,000 bill after you've had a cert.
Well, I would rather wait to see a doctor, and I don't know that the wait's as bad as what they suggest. Certainly not emergency situation.
No.
I would rather wait to see a doctor than become completely precluded from even seeing a doctor. If I can't afford to see a doctor, a dentist or whatever, I don't go. And I either get sicker and I die or somehow heal myself. So, it's real easy to say that you have to wait in Canada. And I've talked to people in Canada and they say it's really not that big a deal. I mean, fuck, you got to wait for a plumber for 2 months in this country. So
Exactly.
I'd rather have the opportunity to have a doctor and not be afraid of what the bills would be, or if I have a pre-existing uh, uh, disease. I'm sick. Go in, give me what I need to do, and do what we can. And I'm hoping that once we're beyond this, people will finally realize that this is ridiculous. That we're paying a high percentage of our income just for health care. That's ridiculous. It should not happen. And I'm hoping the people will wake up, and the Republicans will lose credibility with the bullshit they spew, and maybe we will get some decent health care at some point in the near future.
And and the thing is, Mike, that high cost of healthcare has happened in our lifetime.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I remember as a little boy, I got a taken, should have been to the emergency room, but back then you just went to the doctor's office. And anyway, I got stitches. When I
Right.
got done getting my stitches, my dad whipped out his checkbook. My doctor gave him a bill. He wrote out a check, and down the road we went. But what I'm saying, it, it was very affordable. I couldn't tell you right now today what it was, but I'm sure in comparison, in comparison into what you made for a year, it did not create a heartache, and you didn't have to carry all kinds of insurances because you could afford to pay the bill when you went and seen the doctor. You didn't have to pay premiums every month so you could afford the health care.
Well, that seems to be the case with everything. We have prices going up by leaps and bounds in healthcare, in schooling, in buying cars and houses. And here's where the problem is. Prices on things have gone up dramatically over the last several decades. Income for people has not gone up nearly as quickly. So every year that goes by, the people trying to get by are in a worse position because they can't afford the things they normally could afford. I mean, when I went to the University of Minnesota, I think I paid $1,100 for the semester. A lot of money at the time, but not so much money that when I graduated I couldn't afford to pay it over a couple of years. You could do it. Same thing with healthcare. I don't even know that they had health insurance back in the day. Like you say, you'd go in, you'd have whatever work done, and there'd be enough where you could pay the bill. But for whatever reason, the prices in healthcare and schooling have just skyrocketed. Our incomes have been more stagnant, and therein lies the problem. They're pricing people out of normal services. And so they create these insurance companies to bring it down a little bit, but they're making tons of money. We've got to cut all these middle people out. We've got to get a reins on the healthcare and schooling and such. And we've got to make it so that people can still afford this. And we also have to bring up what kids are getting paid going out of college. You get $100,000 loan on college, and you get a $35,000 a year job. That makes no financial sense.
Yeah, and they, that's the rhetoric that gets put out there. They never bring up. They always say, "Well, you either didn't go get enough education, or you don't have a good enough job, or this, or you live in the wrong place." It's it's never brought up that maybe it's the employers not paying a living wage.
Absolutely.
It comes down to that simple.
Well, and that's probably the biggest problem for the young people in this country. And what they don't realize, it's the biggest problem for the economy in the future. We got millennials and Gen Zs who aren't making enough money commensurate with what their education costs them and commensurate with what expenses are. We've got kids getting out of college, getting low paying jobs because that's all there is. If you can get a job these days anyway, I mean, it's a fucking mess out there. But you got kids working 40 hours a week, or people in the military working their shifts and stuff, and they're still on SNAP because they can't afford the food off just the pay they're getting for 40 hours. That should be a red flag. We're not paying people enough money. And I know people push back about paying people enough money, and I don't understand it. You pay people more money, two things happen. They pay more taxes, they buy more shit. Both of these things are good for the economy. There isn't a downside of paying people a living wage. It's actually very positive because if these young kids can't afford houses, cars, our economy goes to shit in the next 30 years.
And that's where people get lost at, because they always want to give the tax breaks to the corporations. And when you're already a billionaire, that just, to me, that makes for more stagnant money. And like you say, if you give it to the worker ain't going to stuff it in his pillow and you're not going to see it again. He's going to take it to Walmart and spend it. He's going to take it to HEB or Hy-Vee and spend it. It's going to go back out, and it's going to help everybody. That it's money in circulation. You give money back to the billionaires, it's taken out of circulation. It's kind of going stagnant. It does not help your local economy.
If you want to help the economy, and I'm not an economist, I'm just spitballing here, but if you are married and maybe have one or two kids and you're making 50 or $60,000 a year, you shouldn't pay any taxes because that is essentially poverty wage levels. You can't afford things. And if you're in the poverty range, the last thing you should be doing is paying taxes because the more discretionary money you have, the less help you need. So we can
Exactly.
keep people off of SNAP and those sorts of things by letting them keep their money. But that's not where they give the tax breaks. I mean, hell, what Donald Trump wants to do now, he wants to give tax breaks to the rich, and now he wants to take more taxes away from the poor or the working poor. And therein lies the problem. You're basically taking them out of the game. They can't participate in the consumer element of this country, and we need them. There's a lot of them. And if these people aren't making under 50 grand a year, and that's an arbitrary number, and they aren't paying taxes, they're going to be able to live better and buy more shit. And by anybody's standards, that's better for the fucking economy.
Yeah, and that's why it's so upside down, because they give the tax breaks to the rich. It's just like our income tax. After you made 100,000, you pay no more income tax. That's when you should be paying more income tax. Up to that point, you should still have to pay, but not a very high percentage. After that point, you should pay a higher percentage, because if you can't live on that, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I I'm not sure how this shutdown is going to end, but I have a theory that whenever you have people like we have with the Republicans, the bullies, the narcissists, whatever, they always get to the point where they get over their heads, they get painted into a corner, and they seem to be painted into a corner because they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they come back in session after the House comes back in session after 5 weeks on vacation, um, and passes the CR with protection of the subsidies on ACA, and also does the discharge petition for the Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump is going to lose his shit. But if they don't do that, the people in their constituency that are going to get their asses kicked are going to make sure they don't get reelected. I'd hate to be a Republican now because you can't win either way. At some point, you got to say, fuck Donald Trump. I'm going to try to stay alive and get reelected again. It may be too late for them, but the Republicans have put themselves in this position, and I don't think they know a way out.
Well, and it's all in the rhetoric they put out too, Mike, because I'm out here in the Red Sea, and it's still a lot of people believe in this because Democrats won't go with it is why we're shut down. It's Republicans in charge and they won't negotiate is why we're shut down. But they put out the rhetoric that the Democrats won't, they put out the rhetoric that the Democrats have it shut down because we won't negotiate,
Right. But they're not even in town.
Exactly.
How can you negotiate with somebody who's not in town?
And I think the longer it goes, the more people that are catching on to their bullshit. So,
well, they are, and I think that even Republicans are starting to catch on. It's funny. I wanted to bring this up because I read this news story. We know with the shutdown, TSA people aren't getting paid. Air traffic controllers aren't getting paid. And Nancy Mace, who is one of those crazy Republicans, Trump humper, she was in Charleston International Airport on Thursday. This is the story. Representative Nancy Mace yelled at police and called them fucking incompetent during a meltdown at the Charleston International Airport on Thursday, according to a police report. Mace was apparently upset that officers with Charleston County Aviation Authority Police Department arrived late to a meetup spot at the airport to escort the Congresswoman. After the officers located Mace, she began loudly cursing and making derogatory statements to us about the department. The report obtained by Wired. She repeatedly stated, "We're fucking incompetent and this is no way to treat a fucking U.S. representative." The report adds that the Transportation Security Administration supervisor also had problems. The TSA also had problems with Mace, telling officers that congresswomen treated their staff poorly. The entire walk to the gate B8, she was cursing and complaining and often doing the same into her phone. So here's the thing. We've got Republicans that claim to be for the people and patriotic and such. But when you hear something like this, all you can say is, these are some arrogant, entitled, stupid bitches. I mean, if you're a representative, do you do that in public? I mean, you might be an asshole in private, but why would you do that in public?
Because they feel entitled, Mike. I don't think they even realize what they sound like. There's so much. Go ahead.
When you're at the airport, there's a lot of high stress. I know my wife gets it. She works part-time at Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. And people are late, and then they want to blame my wife because they're late. People are at a higher level of stress. But I'm guessing Nancy Mace is pretty well handled through the whole process. The thing that she was upset about, that there weren't police officers where they needed to be to escort her. This is all about arrogance. This is about, I'm important. You got to start treating me like I'm important. Well, I tell you what, Nancy Mace, you're a representative, a U.S. representative who's been on vacation for fucking 5 weeks during a shutdown. You won't talk about the Epstein files. You haven't done anything. You haven't done anything for 5 weeks. You're getting paid $175,000 a year. You're getting a per diem of $79 a day for food, and people are fixing to get starved here. So, excuse me, Nancy, if we don't give you the respect that you think you deserve.
And that's another thing. Congress, that from what I've read, Mike, they get paid during the shutdown
Yeah,
because
they do.
they've gotten to make their own rules if they as they've gone here, and that's also a democratic problem too. When all this shit comes to an end, and maybe it's gotten bad enough that we will go through our political system. I'm not saying that I think our democracy is the greatest democracy there was. I think it's kind of gone now, but I think when we get it back, we can do some tweaking and we can go for another 250 years. Things do change as things progress, but Donald Trump is shit so bad on everything. I think it's time to go in and change where we need to change things. And like term limits and age limits and blah blah blah. There's a lot of people that are smarter than I am that can figure all that out.
Well, I'm thinking too with what's going on and how bad Donald Trump is destroying the Republican Party, trying to destroy democracy and do all these things. When we come out the other side, whenever that may be, you have to wonder if there aren't some dramatic changes in the way we do business in government. I mean, we found out a lot of things. You used to think that if you got a subpoena from Congress, that's pretty serious. You better show up. But now we find out you don't have to show up. If you don't want to and have a good excuse, you don't show up. Rule of law isn't really in existence. There are people above the law. So all these things we've been told for decades and decades clearly aren't true because Congress and the DOJ don't have the teeth that we were led to believe. So I'm wondering if when we get to the point when Donald Trump is gone, the Republican and the MAGA party are divided because they're already divided. Um, if we don't see some dramatic changes in our form of government. I'm not saying getting away from democracy, but maybe some more permanent guardrails that people can't, like, for example, a sitting president has immunity or can't be indicted while he's in office. That needs to stop. If you truly think no one's above the law, then no one should be above the law.
The other thing, and I'll go right with this one, we got a sitting president with 34 felonies.
Yeah.
And I got to maybe look up my record, and I've gotten a lot of it expunged, so I could be talking a little bit out of my ass. But what one time I thought I checked, and I thought I had 17 felonies. Well, not ever in my fucking wildest dreams did I ever think I could have ran for president. It,
I have to have a feeling. I have a feeling that when you came out of, and for the people who don't know, we've talked about it in the past. While he's a respected businessman in town now, there was a period of time when he was younger, and a little sketchy life, and maybe did some time in lockdown. But I have to think that the moment you got out of prison the last time, getting a job wasn't that easy because of those felonies.
well, that's one thing I never had to run into, Mike, because I learned real quick being self-employed, you could do a lot more things than you could working for somebody else. And I was on a job one time, and it was a federal job, and they escorted me off the job because I didn't pass the background check. And I'm not going to say where it was. Anyway, that was on a Thursday or a Friday. I came back on Monday. I owned 1% of that business. The difference between employees and employers is they didn't run background checks on the employers. Everybody in that place where I was working knew that I got escorted off the week before, and I came back in as an owner the next week. And I never looked back, Mike. I guess I never went to a place, I I can't say I was been self-employed my whole life since then, but I used to spray at the power plant here. Now, if I wanted to go apply for a job at that power plant, I wouldn't be able to back pass a background check. But as an employer, I can go in there and work as an employer. I used to be a subcontractor out there, if that makes any sense. So there's ways around everything. But one thing that needs to be changed, let's get off of me here, is anybody with any felonies at all should not be able to run for president.
For
I
any
filed
elected
to run
office.
for sheriff one time and I couldn't do it because I had felonies. Lo and behold, you can't be a sheriff in your home county, but you can be a goddamn president for the United States. Now, if that ain't screwed up, I don't know what is. And now we got a 34 a president with 34 felonies, and you see how fucked up he's got it. So the last thing we need in as a president is a felon president.
Well, and that may be one of the things that we need to make an amendment to the Constitution. People ask me all the time, how can a guy with 34 felonies be elected president? And the answer is simple. The answer is that nowhere in the Constitution does it say if you have felonies, you can't be elected to office or you can't run for office. That was something that the founding fathers didn't put in there, mainly because they thought, who the fuck would ever do that?
Well, and then and not only that, they probably thought, who in the hell would even vote for a felon? And
Right.
we got one in there with 34 felonies. I had to work for almost every one of mine. I couldn't imagine getting 34 of them.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And this is the same guy that complains about the brown people coming across the border that are rapists and criminals and murderers and insane and stuff. I mean, Donald Trump is every one of those things, except for a murder that we know of. But he's been adjudicated as a sexual predator. I think when this is all said and done, there'll be a lot coming out about the Epstein things and Donald Trump. Donald Trump will become a pariah in this country. But this guy is not only somebody who made a mistake once or twice, his whole life has been a criminal activity, his whole life. And still, there are people out there that say, oh, I support this guy. And it just makes no sense. It just fucking makes no sense at all.
Well, he's an 80-year-old fucking brat, is what he is, or
Yeah.
however old he is. But that's what happens when you never have no checks and balances, and that's why he don't adhere to the checks and balances in the government. So that's another thing we're going to have to change is when that much shit goes on. We got to make it a little bit easier to remove a person like that. At least when Nixon, the shit went down with him, his own party went in and took him out. The Republicans don't even have a pair of balls amongst all of them to walk in there and take him out of that office.
I think that day could come. I've talked about this with Eric. I thought that once they elected him, they would quickly realize he's a liability and they would kick him to the curb. The fact that it's still going on amazes me. I don't understand the cowardice. I don't understand the complicity. I just I don't understand it. But at some point, they're going to step away from Donald Trump, assuming he lives long enough to see that happen. And the midterms may be the thing for that. When they lose the House and presumably the Senate, they're going to blame Donald Trump for this. They've got nobody else to blame but Donald Trump. But we've got some elections coming up this coming week. We got Mondami in New York. We got Mickey Sherrill for governor in New Jersey, and the governor in Spangler, I think, or Spangbauer or something like that, in Virginia. And people are suggesting that if these three Democrats win in a big way, that's going to send shivers down the back of the Republican Party because they're seeing the trend. I don't know how they can't already see it, but it would be wonderful if it throws a scare into them.
And I hope so. But you know, and that's the other thing. And it's in your name, the Rational Boomer, and you know, and I follow your podcast, and you always like to look at things rationally,
Yeah.
and that's where we went wrong with this regime because nothing they've done has been rational, and it's been a steamroller effect, and you know, I hope that they grow a pair amongst them to go in there and remove them. I really do because I think that's the best check and balance that we have is his own party, and that would be the rational thing to do. But they haven't done a rational thing the whole time he's been in there.
Yeah, I've always said I base everything I come up with on common sense, logic, and trying to be rational. And
Yes.
unfortunately, we are at a time with common sense, logic, and rationality isn't a thing anymore. So that makes it much tougher to figure out what's going to happen. You still have to kind of discern what's happening and what the outcome might be. And some people have given me shit. You were wrong about this. Motherfucker, I'm wrong about a lot of shit. Just ask my wife. I'm always wrong. But when you're looking at a situation, you got to figure out which way could this go. And I prefer to look at the ways out of situations. And people will say, why do you always look for a way out of the situation? I say, because I'm 65 years old. I've been in some situations and here I sit. I've always found a way around it or out of it or through it or whatever it is. Um, Things will naturally end up going positive ultimately. And something like what we're experiencing now might open the door for something way more positive than had Kamala Harris won. I rue the day that Kamala Harris lost. I thought she would win, but maybe, again, taking a look at the bright side, maybe with the world crashing down around us, this will finally end the whole MAGA Republican bullshit and people just won't buy it anymore.
Oh, and now I do believe that part. I think one time the it wasn't the last time, but I think I was on the podcast like the night before the election, and I was in 100% with you. There was no way that she could lose.
Yeah.
But I think, like you say, you know, always got to look for the bright side, and I'm with you. I think Trump has screwed up our politics so bad, but he's also found the weak spots. I think once we come through it, we're going to be better off as a nation. But I think it's going to take a lot more pain, and I think it may come down to it may even take some deaths. You know.
Well, it already has to a certain extent. With the ICE raids, there have been
Yes.
people that have been in detention that have died because of the treatment they've received. Now, there are some reps that have made some comments that I find interesting and maybe a little comforting. Um, I can't remember who the rep was. Maybe it was Rashkin. And he said, listen, if you're in ICE or you're in the cabinet or you're somebody that's worked with Donald Trump to commit some of these crimes, you maybe want to look at lawyering up because when this is all said and done, if Donald Trump is still alive, he'll be taken to task, but he has a certain amount of immunity. But none of you motherfuckers have immunity. And there's going to be a demand for accountability, and they're going to be coming after people like ICE agents or like Kristi Noem or Pete Hegseth or what have you. So um, I don't know that these people understand that they aren't going to have this security for all time. When Donald Trump's gone and he's not looking like he's got much time left, they're in fucking trouble. Once we get a decent DOJ and a decent Congress, they are going to be taken apart bit by bit.
I hope so. I hope so. And I hope it can happen very quickly and efficiently. And the thing is, they're following that fucking Donald Trump. And one thing out, and this is just a surmise, but I guarantee if they walked into the fucking Oval Office and put handcuffs on that man, from the time they went click until they, he'd be snitching. You know, he's not. gonna protect anybody. He's gonna
No.
be out to protect himself. And I think they're hoping for what pardons or whatever. But when it comes to Donald Trump, he's gonna look out for Donald Trump. He's not gonna look out for his minions.
Well, people always say that. Well, all these people will get a pardon from Donald Trump, and I always tell them if he's alive and still in power. But if he dies tomorrow, nobody's getting a pardon. If he's out of power in disgrace, he's not going to be able to give a pardon. So if you're hoping against hope that you get a pardon for the crimes that you committed, that's a pretty weak bet.
Yes, I think yeah, I don't think he'd do that anyway. You know, for one, the people that work for him don't have enough money that he's even going to consider a pardon. He hands out pardons according to how much money you have. He's
Exactly.
he's running a White House as if you can buy, you can come.
Well, he just recently pardoned this crypto mogul who was an absolute criminal. It's a Chinese gentleman from a company called Binance. He released
Thank you.
him, even though he's an absolute criminal. Um, there's talk of him even pardoning P. Diddy. And I've had people say to me, "How could he couldn't do that?" There's one good reason why he could do it, because P. Diddy has a shitload of money, and he wants to be out of jail. If he says, "Donnie, I'll give you $10 million, give me a pardon," Donnie won't think twice about it. He will fucking do it.
I'm actually I'm I'm actually surprised that he isn't already out. I'm kind of wondering how come he hasn't, because that's all and I don't even know if it take 10 million. And I forget the story, but I'm wondering about is he getting ready to pardon that Maxwell? I can't never say her first name
Ghislaine
because
Maxwell. Yeah.
yeah, just because all these other people that he's pardoned, it wouldn't surprise me. But the P Diddy does surprise me that it hasn't already been done.
Yeah. And you know what? If that happens, the Republicans have to be shitting themselves. There's no positivity from releasing P. Diddy. All the information's been out there. Nobody sides with P. Diddy. And if Donald Trump releases him, there's going to be some Republicans losing their shit too.
And as far as P Diddy and with the other thing is the Epstein files, I think we got to take some cues from what is it, Europe or Great Britain. There's no more Prince Andrew.
You're
We
absolutely
might,
right.
at least they're holding him accountable. We got to look around. We got to start doing that.
Well, there's so much evidence, and there's so many victims that that have told their stories. The idea that we haven't looked into anybody who had these girls trafficked to them, whether they're rich and famous or powerful or whatever, the fact that they haven't even been investigated is troublesome. It's suspicious. And if we need, they want to, the Republicans want to expose Joe Biden for shit he never even did. So why would you blink at people who probably did do it? It's just unbelievable that Republicans continue, and this has got to work against them in elections too. Republicans continue to blatantly cover up for Jeffrey Epstein's files, mainly because Donald Trump is all over it, and because there are other people that they support, might even be people in Congress that could be exposed. But it is a blatant cover up. And as we know from the past, sometimes the cover up is more egregious than the crime itself.
Yeah. And we got to look at the fact too that if there's no crime there, then there's no reason not to bring it out in the open.
Right. If
You
Donald
know,
Trump's not in there, what's the fear about?
exactly. exactly. Expose it. You know, and if there's billions heirs in there, that's their fault for being in there. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it will hopefully push us toward the thing that you were talking about. When you become hungry, you eat the rich. I mean, the problems we have in this country, as much as people want to make it right and left, is really up and down. The wealthy have been controlling this country for a long time. They've got money they're stuffing in the pockets of members of Congress, and all of them are working against us. We can see it every day with taxation and getting the help to the people who need it. They're trying to stop doing it. So I think ultimately there's going to be even a bigger backlash against the wealthy, the oligarchs and such. And this is the one thing they fear the most. That's where, when Will talks about the pitchforks and the torches, that's when it comes out. When you take food away from people, when you take basic needs away from people, history tells us shit doesn't go well for the wealthy. You know, the French Revolution, some of the other occasions in history, people are going to be angry when you've marginalized them to the point where they don't feel like they can do anything. And we're pretty much at that point. People are listening to this November 2nd. Presumably, SNAP is shut off. Hopefully, the courts can get it turned back on, but who the fuck knows?
I hope so. And you could already see how the rich are in control right now because, you know, like you say, there is all this evidence out there. The other thing is there's a lot of survivors out there and it's still being suppressed, you know, and only the rich can do that. You got to realize how much control they have because they've been able to do it for this long with all that evidence, you know. And it's going to get to, like, you know, where you say when people start going hungry, the pitchforks are coming out, and that's when the poor is going to eat the rich and the shit's going to change. It's just too bad it's going to have to get to that point to do that changing.
But as you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and thinking about that she is going to be pardoned, and I'm trying to understand what Donald Trump would gain by pardoning her. Now,
I don't know that he'd gain a thing at this point, except that he does his buddy Ghislaine Maxwell a favor. You know, Donald Trump hasn't made sense his whole term. So I guess, you know, here we are looking at it logically again. And that's one thing that's you can't tell his next move by logic.
well, I will tell you this about narcissists: they have no close friends because anytime somebody's come close to them, they understand how fucking horrid these people are. But here's the thing I'm thinking. Ghislaine Maxwell, the only thing she has to motivate Donald Trump to free her is that she's going to tell somebody about Trump's involvement. But, you know, having a criminal background, if you have somebody threatening you with blackmail, is releasing them from prison the best idea? I mean, if she goes to another country where she can't be touched, decides to write a book because she wants more money, or she goes back to Donald Trump and says, look, I said I wouldn't talk, but now I need money. Give me more. When somebody blackmails you, they keep blackmailing you. I'm more willing to bet that if Ghislaine Maxwell makes that kind of uh, claim that she's going to talk, she's going to end up more like Jeffrey Epstein than free.
Well, and that wouldn't be a bad thing either. And that kind of surprises me that hasn't happened yet because I I would almost bet my life that Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide.
Oh no, I don't think so.
So
You know,
the
for
part
for
that
one
go ahead.
for one thing about and this is why Donald Trump would never commit suicide. Narcissists don't commit suicide. They think they're the most important people in the world. People who commit suicide think they're worthless and they think they've got no hope and they think they've got no chance to get out of whatever problem they're in. Donald Trump and Epstein and people of that ilk don't think that way. So there isn't suicide on the table for them, no matter what. They'll run, they might kill somebody else, but they aren't going to kill themselves.
No, and I'm surprised that she's alive today, because he had to know just as much as Jeffrey Epstein because they were sidekicks. And then we can come back to Donald Trump. How can people not think he was involved when, you can go on, you Google and see how many pictures he had taken together
Right.
with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, and the thing about it is, if you're a smart man and you know what Jeffrey Epstein does and you don't like what he does, the last thing you do is take pictures of him. You don't want that to come back and haunt you. But Donald Trump was so arrogant, thinking he'd never get caught because he rarely got held accountable for anything. He just thought he could do whatever the fuck he wants. And now it's coming back to haunt him. And he doesn't know what to do about that. It was about his arrogance initially. And as always the case, the one thing you can count on, Donald Trump will fuck himself. And he's doing it every day.
Yes, he is.
I mean, like you've been in the hospital. Have you ever had an MRI?
Yes,
Why did you have an MRI?
because I had something wrong with me.
There you go. And so they had to take a closer look as to see what was the cause of that problem. Do you buy the idea that Donald Trump had an MRI for just a routine checkup? That just doesn't happen.
No, and didn't he say he aced the MRI?
Yeah, and he aced the cognitive
Yeah,
test, which is a joke.
yeah. Everything's always a competition with him, and he's got to ace everything. You MRIs is because you have something wrong with you. It's not because you're acing the test.
Right.
So,
Well, when you look at Donald Trump right now, what are your thoughts about his mental capacity and his health? Do you think we're on the downside of him continuing on this mortal coil?
I think he's diminishing quick. He don't glitch quite like Mitch McConnell, but he is not. To me, he does not look like a healthy man, and he's not a young man either. You know.
No, hell no. Well, I talked to Ed yesterday, and he re-upped on his prediction that Donald Trump would be no more by Thanksgiving. We're getting close. I mean, I hope against hope Ed's right, but Donald Trump is kind of like a cockroach too. He seems to come out from under the refrigerator no matter what happens.
Yeah, that's the thing about him. He didn't look good a couple of years ago, and now
He looks
he is.
worse.
Yeah, and that he's declining. But I hope he's gone by Thanksgiving too. But I'm not gonna bet on it because I thought he would have been gone a long time ago. If not for death, he would have been removed. So
You're talking about going out to this protest in D.C. and having gone to the No Kings protest. I hope that if Donald Trump dies tomorrow or anytime soon, I think Republicans are going to be appalled by the joyous celebrations throughout the country. It's going to be chaotic because people will be so happy. But I think at that point, if Donald Trump is gone and J.D. Vance is the president, and he doesn't scare me as much as Donald Trump because he just doesn't have the respect or the fear from Republicans that Donald Trump has. Um, I think it's absolutely important that these protests continue because when you're dealing with a bully, and I'm talking about the Republican Party in general, when you've got them down, you've got to keep kicking them until they stay down. Otherwise, they'll come back like cancer metastasizing from a little spot. Would you agree with that? The protests have to continue even after Donald Trump is no more?
yes, because the Republicans let this happen, and here's the way I look at this protest: is like this No Kings one, I had to travel 45 miles.
Hmm.
The more people we can get to Washington, D.C., the better it is, because a lot of people can't go because it's going to turn out, and it's a day travel out there, it's a day there, it's at least a day travel back. At the very least, I'm going to be giving up 3 days, but it's probably going to be a 4 or 5 day deal. A lot of people can't afford that. If I got to cover my own costs, I will. That'll take my winter money. But the other thing is, a lot of people can't afford to take the time to go out there.
Right.
And the other thing is, it could turn out to be a scary situation. So what I'm saying is, there's a lot of odds against individuals going out there. So if we show up and there's millions of us, it's going to really show that a lot of people quit what they're doing to make it happen.
Well, it is an interesting phenomenon. We spent decades and decades of apathy with voters. And because of their apathy, that's why, partially why we are where we are right now. But when you see 7 million people come out on the No Kings protest, and the hundreds and the thousands and the tens of thousands that come out in other protests, it seems like we are starting to get over that apathy thing. People who wouldn't normally get involved in shit are saying, fuck it, I'm going out. I'm going to do this. And that's a welcome sight, I got to be honest.
Yeah, and it's like me. I've never been political until the first time Trump ran for office, and I never went to a protest until that second No Kings. I'm like, and now this Washington D.C. deal. There's a lot of odds against me, but I do have the time to do it, and I feel it's important. And I've never done this before, and I'm sure I'm not the Lone Ranger, so it's waking a lot of us people up. I we're taking responsibility is the way I look at it.
Well, I have a feeling, maybe I'm speaking out of school here, but knowing her, I have a feeling that if this is going to be a big protest in DC, Old Soul is going to be out there. So if she has any insights for Howard, please let him know about, the whole process of doing this sort of thing and what to look forward to. And maybe you two will get a chance to meet. And if you get a chance to meet Old Soul, by all means do it. It is quite an experience. Somebody who's made the commitment to be an activist. That's impressive when she's got so many other things going on. She somehow stays on top of everything. But I think these protests are are making some inroads against the Republicans, and they consistently see thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people coming out to speak against them. It can't help but have an impact.
I hope so, because it takes time and sacrifice to go. And you talk about Old Soul. I couldn't hold a candle to that lady. I admire her, and I don't even know her. And if I get the chance to meet her, I'd look at that as it'd be great. It'd be an honor to meet a woman that can do the things that she does. Now, I can't be what she is, but I can be another body in Washington, D.C. And right now, all the bodies that we can get out there is very, very important, I feel.
Well, and I think that's the important thing people have to understand. A lot of people think, well, I can't go to the protest, I can't travel here, I can't really do much of anything, and I feel bad about it because I should participate. The thing about it is, you do whatever you can do, no matter how
Yes.
small, no matter how large, it's going to have an impact. It's part of the whole thing. And even if you um, are just doing TikToks that maybe nobody watches, the fact that you're making the effort and adding to the narrative, that's important. Not everybody, not everybody has a large platform. I mean, I certainly don't have the largest platform on TikTok and YouTube and stuff, but I've been doing it consistently for 5 years.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I do that is because, say for instance, you, Howard, you may not have a huge platform on TikTok or YouTube, but if I can give you a platform to speak your words, I think that's what's important. It's not just me up here pontificating. We need more and more people speaking out. I mean, if the only thing you could do is to send me an email and say, hey, I want to be on your show and speak my mind, that's something. That's a different perspective. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't do enough or you're not doing what's important. Do what you can do and be part of a bigger a bigger group here that is doing a lot of things at this point. And Old Soul's a good example of that. I don't know how she pulls that shit off. I text with her brother from time to time. He goes, "You're not gonna fucking believe this," and I go, and he says, "What do you think about this?" I go, um, "I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised because she's in Japan right now. She's going to
Yeah.
come back here in a week or so, and she probably is going to DC or some other protest someplace else. She's working it and she's doing a lot, but don't gauge what you do to somebody like Old Soul because she's an aberration."
Yeah. And I try not to. And as far as coming on bigger platforms, that's one thing I very much appreciate about you because it helps me tremendously when I do come out here because I get to get it out of my system.
Yeah.
And now, like my sister, she's a liberal over there in South Dakota. She became an avid follower yours because I came on the show, but it helps me reach more people. And it's just like we're all in this fight together. We're not competitors. We're in this together, and it's just like I'm small compared to you, but if there's anything I could do for you, I'd be right there, because
Well,
we have. Go ahead.
that's one of the things Old Soul said, and some other people have said too. And it was never my intention, not because I didn't want to do it, because I didn't think I could do it, but people have said we've kind of built a community where people know one another. You and I would never have known one another. TJ and I would never have known one another, and we're all different parts of the country, but we're all of a like mind. And that's kind of what it takes, to pull people of a like mind together. There may be some podcasters out there that think, well, I'm the star of the show and I can do it all. I know I can't do jack shit without listeners, without people coming on. That's the only thing I can do. I'm certainly not a one man band. I am little more than a shit stirrer, and I stir shit every day. And I think that's important when we can give other people a chance to speak their mind, because there's certainly plenty of people just as smart and articulate as I am. If we can if I can put in the time to build the audience and then we can get that information out there. I mean, look at Will. It's funny with Will. Will has never gotten a big audience on TikTok, but he comes on this podcast, people fucking love him. It's a matter of who you're exposed to and who's doing the expose. TikTok is a bullshit app. I'm just going to say it. In spite of the fact I have a lot of
Yeah.
followers on there, it's a bullshit app, and they're trying to suppress people like me and Will and you and everybody else. So that's why I'm thankful to have the other platforms where they don't do that. But Will is a prime example. He can't get the traction he wants to on TikTok because TikTok is holding him back. He can come here, talk to a larger crowd of people, and resonate with them. And I think that's important.
And the other thing that I love about you and your show, I love Will coming on because he's so passionate. I would get burnt out being a Will, you know what I mean? Because that's got to take a lot of energy. And then the next day you have somebody like Eric on. And I'm not saying he isn't passionate, but he's more level and he's more um,
He's more
not a lot
detailed. He
as much
knows.
emotion into it, more facts. You know what I'm saying? So you get the whole realm, and we
Yeah,
all have people in common. It's like JD Farmer, John, you just had on. He follows me on TikTok. I follow him. I've never met the man, but I feel like there's a bond there because we think the same way. I've heard him on your show, and he's passionate about these politics like I am. You know,
yeah, and when I have JD Farmer on, I'm particularly happy about that because he's a 24-year-old kid. He's the group of people that are going to have to deal with this bullshit when they get older and we're dead. So
yes,
it's good to get a perspective from somebody in a business that's mostly Republican, but in a state that's blue. It's interesting to get his perspective because the young people, the millennials and the Gen Zs, are really going to dictate what happens in the future, especially in the next election. Millennials and Gen Zs are going to be the majority of the voters in 2028. And if that doesn't change everything, I don't know how much hope we have for this country.
yeah, and that's the other thing. It's people like him and younger that we're going to leave this world to. This damage, I hate to say, might last for a while, but and I'm a lot like you. I got grandkids, and no matter what happens, I want them to be able to bring their grandpa up and say, at least our grandpa tried to do something about this, or
Exactly.
our grandpa helped get this changed. I feel that we're going to change it, so that I hope that's what they're saying. Our grandpa was part of that.
Exactly. I feel the same way. I have sons that are in their 30s. I have a daughter in law in her 30s. I have a granddaughter who's 5 and a grandson who's 5 months old today. Um, I'm desperately fearful of leaving a shitstorm, shithole country when I'm long dead and can't do anything about it. I'm limited. I'm 65 years old. I'm a guy sitting in his living room in Minnesota, but I'm going to do whatever I can to stir some things up. Like you say, at least when they look back, they'll say, well, Grandpa was a little fucking crazy, but at least he tried to make it better. If that's all I can do, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We can't sit here and just let it happen. And it's like going to this rally out DC. You know, what's the, I suppose the worst that could happen is we could get shot at by the military. But in realistic, what's the worst that could happen? We might get thrown in jail for a few days. Well, yeah, so what? Been there before. It's not good. The only thing it's going to do is screw up my flight plans on the way back. That's the only thing that's going to do.
Yeah, if they think throwing you in jail is going to be a new experience or a scary experience for you, you've got some experience with that. So in that regard, you'll be safe. I don't think you'll run into too much trouble. The whole military coming out, the National Guard legally isn't supposed to be able to do anything. And I think the National Guard is getting to the point where they're getting a little fed up with sent on missions, taken away from their homes and jobs for bullshit. I think we're going to see, and same with the military. I think we're going to see some resistance from the military because they too have an oath that they swore to, and they can be held responsible after the fact. And they've got to be at least looking at those things. We've got big, top brass people um, resigning because of the circumstances that are going on. I can't imagine the military, even the National Guard, um, become radicalized by Donald Trump at this point. It's just not going well for him.
I kind of feel that way too, because the other thing that we got to think about is if they try to turn the military on our own people, they're turning the military on their own cousins and brothers. And,
Right.
you can talk about the oaths all you want, but the other thing most military people have is a conscience. People aren't going to go against their conscience when it comes down to weapons and and unarmed civilians. I'm You know, it happened at Kent State, but that's what changed everything. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, and I think people are realizing now quickly that they're taking orders from a buffoon and an idiot,
Yeah.
and they're not
The
going to feel
draft
very
dodger.
good about it.
How could you take an order from a fucking draft dodger?
It seems hard to imagine, but and especially after that little dog and pony show that Hegseth and he put on in front of the generals. He thought that was going to do him some good. I think that did a lot of damage to whatever respect the military might have had for Donald Trump.
Yeah, we talked about that on the last time I was on the podcast. I think that was the best thing they ever did because I really feel they did make a lot of enemies with the upper echelon in the military because those are well respected men that have earned them promotions. And then you get a couple fucking circus clowns like fucking Piggy Keg's breath and Donald Trump. You can't go into a room of real men and impress them with bullshit because they
Yeah,
see right through it.
absolutely. I think Donald Trump is going to ultimately implode. He's going to do it to himself, and I'm just looking forward to it. And the quicker, the better. Now, we're going to wrap things up. You're getting older. I'm getting older. We can only take so much. I already did one podcast this morning with Ed.
Cool. I
Um,
like Ed too.
Ed's the best. Yeah, there's no question
Yep.
about that. But um, Howard is plans to go to a protest in Washington D.C. and I'm guessing, like I said, Old Soul will probably be going too. But that's around the 21st, 22nd. Is that right?
22nd of November, remove the regime in Washington, D.C.
Right. And on the show, I never ask people for money. I will never ask them for money for me, certainly,
Yep.
because I think that defeats the whole purpose. But if you are in a position to or want to help out Howard pay for the expenses to go to DC to protest, not only for himself, but for all of us, by all means do that. And he has a Venmo. It's Howard, HOWARD dash Paulsen, PAULSEN. And if you want to send him a couple bucks just to make it easier on him, I would thank you for doing that. I'm all for good causes, and if you want to go out there and stir some shit up, I'll send you a couple bucks too, and we'll make sure that you get out there and represent, as it were.
I appreciate that, Mike, and I really like being on here. I hate to say it's almost like having an animal. It kind of flushes all the bullshit out.
Wow, I've never had that compliment before, and hopefully I'll never
I,
have it again.
I didn't, and you probably never will again. But when you get in and share views with somebody that thinks like you do, when I living out in a Red Sea that I live in isn't always easy.
Maybe I'll use that as a tagline in future promotions. Listen to the Rational Boomer podcast. It's like a colon cleanse. Yeah, all I have to do, I don't need a colon cleanse. All I have to do is eat Mexican. I'm good.
There. And then one thing I'll say about my TikTok, we did put a thing up there with me telling what I'm going to do, but now on my phone, it really came out crappy. So we'll be posting another one. My wife helps me with all this. I'd like to give her a shout out because she never hardly shows up on any of my TikToks, but she does a
Yeah.
lot of my technical work for me besides her full-time job. So
I think all of us that have been married for extended periods of time owe a debt of gratitude to our wives. I've said before, if not for my wife, we had our 42nd anniversary on October 14th. If not for her, I may not even be here. So I appreciate it.
I hear you. Good wife. There's nothing better.
Absolutely. I'm guessing you probably wouldn't be here either without the wife you have.
I don't think I would. I think I would have probably went off. I I got straightened out before I met her, but I don't know if I could have towed the line without her being, it's been a lot of years I've been a changed person, and I give a lot of that to her.
You
So,
know what? I don't defer to many people. There's actually three people in my life that I defer to. That is my wife, my granddaughter, and now my daughter-in-law of just over a year. I love my daughter-in-law,
cool.
and I feel blessed to be able to say that because that's not always the case where in-laws get along like that. But
Yep.
for Halloween, I was going to sit in and hand out candy, but my granddaughter and my daughter-in-law insisted that I had to wear a costume, and I never wear costumes. I would never do it unless one of those three told me to do it. And I said, well, I said to Junie, I said, what do you want me to be? She goes, I don't know. It's got to be a farm animal. And I said, I don't know what it's going to be. And she says, how about if you be a mouse? Oh, a mouse. Okay. So the extent of the mouse is, you notice I have gray shirt on, I have gray pants on, I have gray shoes on. I got one of those little headbands with the mouse ears on it. And little Junie spent about an hour, it seemed like, putting a black spot on my nose. So it looked like I had a mouse nose. It wasn't all that impressive. And I felt like I looked stupid because pretty much I did. But for those three, it's hard. I don't say no. I never tell my granddaughter no. And I certainly wouldn't tell my wife or my daughter in law no. So the rational boomer was sitting in a doorway dressed as a ad hoc mouse, feeling pretty goofy, but you'll never see that here. I won't come here in costume.
I bet you had a great time though.
Oh, I did. I did. You know, when she got done with her trick or treating, she had to come sit with me so because she wanted to hand out candy. The problem with her, though, thankfully we didn't get too many. We got enough. We got a lot of people coming through, but when she gives out candy, she sticks her hand in, grabs a whole big handful, and starts dumping it in people's. I go, honey, you gotta kind of limit it because what if we run out? He goes, we won't run out. We got plenty. I go, you're five. You don't know jack shit, dude. Uh, but it all worked out for the best, and it was good to have a Halloween with a little kid again. So we were excited about that. So again, if you want to help Howard out, get to Washington D.C. to stir some shit up. He's got a Venmo, Howard Paulsen, spelled Paulsen. Uh, Show him what the Rational Boomer audience can do. I mean, he's not looking to buy a car. You
No,
know, he's
no.
looking for gas money. So don't think you have to send a lot of money. But I can appreciate his need to do this, and and so if you can help out, you can. If you can't, just give him a vote of support in the comments.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Well, thank you for joining us, and for those of you listening, thanks for taking the time. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.